Hello, I am Meet, and in this video we will be looking into what's new in Golang 1.24, which will be releasing in February 2025. And in this section, we are talking about omitzero, which is getting added as a tag in the encoding JSON standard library, and that is to do with the marshalling of a data type into JSON. So omitzero will allow us to skip or omit the fields while marshalling from a data type in Golang to JSON. So what marshalling is, it is a process of converting an object such as a map or list or any data type in any programming language. In this case, it is Golang. So converting that object into a format that can be easily transmitted or serialized format like JSON in this case. It could be binary or text serialized format that can be sent over the network. You might be thinking that there is already a tag for that. Wait for that, I will clear those things in a moment. But for that, let's see the what zero value it means. So the zero value for its type, right? So each type in Golang, primitive type will have a zero value. So false for boolean, zero for numeric types, empty string for strings, nil for pointers, functions, interfaces, slices, arrays, and channels, and maps as well. Those are the zero values of it, which means once you initialize and declare a variable, those will be set to a default value, which is the zero value of that type. So there will be cases, right? Omit empty. This is the tag that is used to omit the empty values for that type. And if you look into the JSON documentation with Marshal, that there's a section for omit empty. So Marshal, what it does, it uh, takes in any structure, any type of data that is there in Golang specific data types, and it will convert it into a representation of bytes so that we can transmit it through the wire. So here you can see that omit empty specify that the field should be omitted from encoding if the field has an empty value defined as false, zero, a nil pointer, a nil interface value, and an empty array, slice, map, or string. It doesn't mention structures. And there are a few other types as well, which it doesn't define an empty representation of what it means for uh, time values or structure values. So that definition has a little catch in that. So omit empty is not what it seems. It is not a zero value for all the types. There are a few exceptions there. So that is why we have a new tag being added to encoding JSON package, which is omit zero. And what it will do is it will explicitly ignore the values which are zero values. And we can add in the function is zero to define what a zero value is for our custom types or structures. So if you see the proposal clearly here, we have defined that empty structs are included in the marshalling process. So here we have given a nice example of an empty structure. So we'll have few fields like time and empty structure, and then a structure with a string field in it, and we initialize the bigger structure as empty, and you can see that it should be an empty string because there are no because it was not initialized, because we have just initialized it as empty structure, but it has initialized it with it actually didn't omit the time field and the empty structures, which it should have been, because there is no definition for an empty structure. It could be empty or it could not be empty. So there's no a clear definition for what it means to be an empty structure. So that's why omit empty doesn't work over here well. So this proposal seems to be accepted, and uh, so this is in the milestone for Golang 1.24. So it should be released with the next release, which is coming in 2025 in February. So let's take an example here. I have one structure called block config with the fields called name, authors, and config, which is a post config and another custom data type here. So if you see the name is a string, author is a list of string, and post config is a structure. And we have used omit empty for each of them just to demonstrate what it means to leave the empty values for this. So post config has a lot of types: id as integer, type as string, and tags as list of strings, filters as map of strings and strings. So if you see, we have initialized block config as empty structure, and now we will try to run this code with Golang 1.23. So you can see that this is the Golang version running 23, and I will run this, and you can see the configs is still being created. It is empty, but it is created with the default empty value. But that config should not present in that, because the post config is basically empty, because we have initialized block config as empty, so it should have been empty. So if you run this with Golang 1.24 as well, like the omit empty function, empty tag, omit empty tag, that will still give us the configs, because omit empty works the way it used to work in Golang 1.24 as well. But once you add in omit 0 to block config with the configs post config, because it is a struct and not a thing. So that will run the same way in Golang 1.23, but if you see in Golang 1.24, it will have removed that config, because that structure has a zero value now. So I'll try to add is zero method to override what it means to define a structure is zero valued. So I will define this is zero method on this, which it will return the boolean. So I will just compare the fields which are probably zero values. So id is the integer, so it will be zero. Type will be empty string. So the tags is a list of strings, so it should be empty. So its length should be empty. This is a bit redundant, but we can have pointers as well. So the len of filter is a map, so that should be empty as well. So this is what it might look like to have is zero method on the structures. So we will return either true or false with the is zero method. And you can see this works the same way on 1.24 as well. And now if I try to change the zero value for, if I try to set the default or zero value for type as name, then you can see the 1.24 version will keep the configs uh, field, because now it's not a zero value. The zero value was empty, so that will be not be omitted from this. Now the zero value for type is post and not empty string. So uh, if I keep block config as empty, it should technically return uh, those values. So what I will do is I will try to add the config type as post. And once I have the configs as post, this should return an empty string, because like empty structure, because the type has post in it, which is a empty, which is a zero value for type in the post config structure. So once we have set the config as post, the type literal value as post, uh, and we run it with the Golang 1.24, 1.23 will return it, because now the empty thing is broken. So, the empty, it's not empty. The post config is now not empty. So it will return that configs as it is. So that is that. But if we run this with 1.24, you can see it as empty, because the type value is post. That is the zero value for that. As we have overwritten is zero method on that. structure. So you can see now id is -1 as a default as a zero value, and if I change the id in the block post config within the block config structure, you can see now it has again gone through an empty structure, but Golang 1.23 will still be the same. So once we have that, that is how is zero method we can use it to override what it means to have structure as a zero value. And if you remove the omit empty, it will still work the same way in 1.24 because omit empty was used to define if that was empty or not. And omit zero does things differently, which is it checks the zero value of each individual field within the entire structure. That's how it works, and that is how omit zero will be used in this Golang 1.24. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.